Hello, I'm Kurma and welcome. In this series, we're going to show you how to cook a wide variety of international vegetarian cuisine from over 30 countries. And in this edition, we're going to show you how to prepare a South Indian dinner consisting of boiled rice, South Indian vegetable combination, avial, South Indian hot and sour soup, sambar, and savoury wholemeal pancakes, dosa. So, let's begin. India is the land of regional cuisines. Each region has its own particular cooking styles. In South India, there are some outstanding varieties. But if there is one thing which unites all the cooking styles of South India, it's their prodigious use of rice and dal. It's said that South India has the best high carbohydrate, high fibre diet in the whole of India. I'm going to show you now how to make a very simple boiled rice with a difference. This method of cooking rice is adapted from the age-old method of cooking rice in clay pots over open fires. The rice is half cooked, then the water is drained off, and the big clay pots are placed on the dying embers of the fire to continue cooking. We've adapted that method in our kitchen by half cooking the rice in lots of water, draining it off, and then placing it in the oven. It's a very effective method. Let's have a look at the ingredients we've got here. Over here we've got some basmati rice. 1.5 cups of basmati rice. We're going to plunge that into 10 cups of boiling water, which is already on the stove. We've got a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice and a teaspoon of salt. And if you like, you can pop in some butter during the baking time. First thing we're going to do is plunge our rice into our boiling water, like so. That rice was pre-washed. And the salt. Salt's optional, by the way, you don't have to put the salt in. Put the lid on top, and when the rice comes to the boil, let it cook for exactly 10 minutes. The rice then will be a little bit over half cooked. Then we're going to drain it and bake it. Let's come back and have a look at it in 10 minutes, shall we? Let's have a look at our rice here, shall we? The rice grains at this stage should be half cooked, which indeed they are. Rather hot too. Each rice grain has a little hard core in the centre. That means it's ready to pop in the oven. Let's take it over the sink and strain it. Give it a good shake, get all that water out. We're going to bake it in our Pyrex dish here. So get it into the oven as soon as you can while it's still piping hot. And hopefully this all fits in our dish, which indeed it does. Perfectly fitting there. Don't forget the lid. Let's take it over to our oven and give it our final burst. Okay, you rice, here I come. It's hot in there. Ooh, right. Let's have a close look at our rice here. Take off this little lid. Hot and steamy in there. If you're not sure whether the rice is done, take one grain between your thumb and forefinger and squeeze it. As you can see, there's no little hard core inside. Fluffy, boiled rice. Bring on the vegetables. On the sunny Malabar coast of South India lies the state of Kerala, basking on the Arabian Sea. One much loved vegetable dish there is known as avial. It's specially prepared for festive occasions. We're going to make that now. It's a moist to semi-dry vegetable stew, and it's beautiful. Let's take a look at our ingredients here. We've got a beautiful selection of locally available produce. We've got 1 cup of potatoes that have been peeled and cut into 3/4 inch cubes, the same quantity of zucchini chunks, beautiful orange-coloured sweet potatoes. We've got 1/2 cup of fresh green peas. And over here, 1 cup each, carrot chunks, pumpkin cubes, and bits of green beans. Now, in the spice department, it's quite lightly seasoned. We've got 4 tablespoons of coconut oil. This is the very favourite South Indian oil for cooking vegetable dishes. We've got 8 fresh curry leaves. We've got 2/3 of a cup of water. We've got a teaspoon of turmeric powder, a teaspoon of ground coriander, 3 hot green chilies that have been minced. South Indians like it hot. We've got half a cup of plain yogurt, 2/3 of a cup of shredded fresh coconut, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Oh, I'd like to tell you a few things about curry leaves. They're sometimes known as sweet neem leaves. They're powerfully fragrant and they're used a lot in South Indian cooking. They actually look like miniature lemon leaves. They're the leaf of the tropical karhi plant. They've actually been grown in India all the way from the Himalayas all the way down to the south, Kanyakumari, since time immemorial in tropical rainforests. They're wonderful spices to have on hand. So let's start by sautéing our curry leaves in our coconut oil. Put our flame on here, medium heat, pop in the oil, and we're going to add our curry leaves. Sauté them until they crackle a little bit. This extracts their beautiful fragrance. And on top of that, we're going to put all our lovely vegetables. The carrots, the beans, the pumpkin, the peas, the sweet potatoes, the potatoes and the zucchinis. Now we're going to sauté all our vegetables for about 3 or 4 minutes until they start to go a little limp. Then we're going to add our water, coriander powder and turmeric. Well, I think these vegetables are sufficiently sautéed now. I'm going to add my coriander powder, turmeric powder and some water. Give it a quick stir around, mix in all those spices. Now we're going to steam the vegetables in the flavoured water until they're just tender, and then we're going to add our final ingredients. They're all folded through. I'm going to pop on the lid and come back in about 10 minutes. See you then. And here we are back at the pot, and it looks like our vegetables are pretty close to being done. Let's give them a stab with our trusty kitchen knife and see. Butter soft. Okay, let's add our final delicious ingredients here. We've got our coconut, freshly grated. This is one of South India's gifts to the world. We've got our salt, some green chilies, lots of green chilies, and some fresh plain yogurt. That's very carefully folded all in now for our grand finale. It's looking real here, the real thing. This is really wonderful served as is normally done in South India with a big pot of boiled fluffy rice. A beautiful combination, very authentically seasoned from South India, Avia. A South Indian meal would not be complete without the addition of sambar. Sambar is a hot and sour, smooth, puree-like soup made from a special type of dal or lentil called tur dal. This is tur dal. This is the oiled variety of tur dal. They sometimes rub oil on the lentils to stop insect infestation. Now, when tur dal is required in a recipe, I always soak it in water. This dal over here has been soaked for 4 hours in warm water. Notice how it changes colour and swells up. When you cook tur dal, it becomes a beautifully creamy, sweet-flavoured puree. It's very, very easy to digest. One of the things you might like to note about tur dal to distinguish it from other dals is its kidney shape. Notice how the shape of the split lentil is very much shaped like a kidney. So first thing you have to do, for at least 4 hours before you're ready to start cooking, soak your dal in water, which indeed we have done. We've got 1 cup of dal here, which was soaking in enough water to cover it. I've drained some of the water off here to show you. And that was warm water. And now that before we start to cook it, we're going to take it over to the sink and drain it in our colander. Drain off most of that water. Pop it back in the bowl as much as possible. A few bouncing across the bench. Let's take our dal over to our spice plate here, and I'm going to show you a close-up here of all our lovely spices. Along with our 1 cup of dal that was soaked and drained, we've got half a teaspoon of turmeric powder, 3 teaspoons of butter, a tablespoon of tamarind concentrate, half a cup of shredded fresh coconut, very typical South Indian ingredient there. We've got half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of ghee or clarified butter, a teaspoon of mustard seeds, 2 teaspoons of hot green chilies that have been seeded and minced, a quarter of a teaspoon of fenugreek seeds, 10 dried curry leaves, a quarter of a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder, 2 teaspoons of sambar powder, another typical South Indian ingredient, especially for sambar soup, and we've got some salt, 1.5 teaspoons, and to top it all off, a nice garnish of 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh coriander. It's also a must for this soup. The first thing we're going to do now is to put our dal and our butter and our turmeric in our pot over here, where there is 6 cups of boiling water. And we're going to bring all that to a boil, cook it down to a smooth puree, and then add our final seasonings. So in goes the turmeric, along with our butter and our dal. If you've ever wondered why the water goes red when you put turmeric in instead of yellow, it probably means there's some chlorine in your water. That always does the trick, makes the turmeric go a funny red colour, but after about 10 minutes it always clears, so don't be alarmed. Alright, well, we're going to stir this up a little bit, that's sufficient. Pop a lid on top, bring it to the boil, reduce it to a simmer, and when it's nice and pureed, we're going to add our other seasoning. There you are, it's come to the boil and that nice yellow colour is resumed. Normally you would boil this for about an hour or until the dal has completely turned into a smooth puree. Let's pop the lid back on here, and while we're waiting for our dal to cook, we're going to grind up some brown sugar, cayenne pepper and some coconut with a little bit of water in our food processor over here. This is going to make a puree, coconut puree, which we're going to add to our soup. Let's take off our lid, like so. In goes the coconut. Fresh coconut has a lovely aroma. Cayenne pepper. This is to go along with the green chilies. If you don't like it so hot, you can miss out either one of those. And a little slurp of water. Pop the lid back on. Okay, I think that's done. Let's take off our lid, scrape out what we can from the lid. We're going to transfer that back into our little glass bowl. In South India, your average South Indian housewife would grind all this up on a big stone mortar and pestle. But here in the West we have our labour-saving devices, our blenders and food processors, and they do a pretty good job. Although I prefer the flavour of dals cooked home style. Okay, here's our coconut puree. Let's take it over to our spice plate and continue on. What I've got over here is a pot of finished dal, which I'm going to swap over with our half-finished dal. Then I'm going to proceed on with our cooking. Cooked dal over here. Now we're going to add our coconut puree and our tamarind puree, our tamarind concentrate mixed with a little water. And then our final zesty seasoning. You can mix these two purees in until they're fully blended. This is a very traditional sambar colour here. Notice how it went dark? That rich brown colour is due to the tamarind puree. So let's heat our spices up for our final zesty seasoning. Pop some ghee in our frying pan. And we're going to first of all add some black mustard seeds. Mustard seeds, some green chilies, fenugreek, curry leaves, asafoetida, and our sambar masala. give it a stir up. It's smelling absolutely divine. I wish you could smell this. Let's pop it into our dal soup here. Ooh, explosive and very, very aromatic. Sometimes I make this and the neighbours bash on the ceiling. Let's turn it down a little bit. Stir it for another couple of seconds. We've got our fresh coriander. Nice green touch there. Bit of salt. Stir it in, and there we have a beautiful, highly scented pot of sambar soup. And there it is. Every South Indian housewife has her recipe for sambar, and here's mine. Hot and sour sambar soup. Every country of the world has many varieties of pancakes to offer, and India is no exception. In fact, South India is famous for its dosa pancakes. Now, whereas dosa pancakes in South India are often made with dal and rice, they're also made sometimes with whole wheat flour, and that's the sort of dosa pancakes I'm going to show you how to make now. And whereas often dosa pancakes are made as much as this big, in big, very large fry pans, I'm going to show you how to make little dosa pancakes that will fit into your householder size non-stick frying pans. Let's have a close look at our ingredients here. We've got the basis of our pancakes being whole wheat flour. This is the Indian style atta flour. There's 2 cups of it. We've got a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder. We've got some salt here. This is 1.5 teaspoons of salt. We've got 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. This helps the pancakes rise a little bit. We've got some minced green fresh chilies here. There's 3 small serrano chilies that I used. A tablespoon of fresh minced coriander leaves, and we're going to splash a little bit of ghee or clarified butter on our pan to make the pancakes cook really nicely. We have a non-stick pan, so it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, well, I think the first thing we're going to do now is to make our batter. Let's get our flour and place it in our bowl here, like so. Then we're going to add our baking powder. Let's add our salt and our yellow asafoetida powder. And while we're at it, our chilies and our coriander. In other words, everything except the water. I haven't told you how much water to add because that we're going to do as we go along, a little bit at a time until we get to the right consistency. This takes a little bit of practice. We're going to mix up our ingredients here till we get a pouring consistency batter. A little more water, I think, a splurp and a splash here and there. And I think we're reaching the desired consistency. Just a dribble more, shall we? Okay. I think that's just about it. You know, whole wheat pancakes are not only delicious, but they're also nutritious. Wheat itself is very high in protein, and an economical source of protein at that, because studies have shown that 1 steer can produce man with 43 pounds of protein per acre per year, whereas wheat can provide 269 pounds of protein per acre per year. That's quite an astonishing fact, huh? Well, I'm going to stop stirring my batter now before I get repetitive strain injury, and I'm going to go and come back in about 15 minutes. Our batter should have been nicely aerated. Then we're going to cook up our dosa pancakes. Okay, I'm back. And the batter's looking good. Looks pretty much like it did before, but it's been sitting there for 15 minutes. Boy, the place is a mess though, isn't it? Let's clear the decks, as they say. Who said I was a messy cook? Where's that paper towel? Let's wipe down some of this batter off the bench. Actually, I'll tell you what you're going to need here. You're going to need a 1/4 cup measure. You're going to need a bowl of batter, which you've already made, hopefully, a brush for brushing your pan, a spatula, and a plate for putting your big stack of juicy dosa pancakes on. Let's start by slurping a bit of ghee in our pan, like so, just a couple of drops, spreading it around. Non-stick pans are great because you don't need much oil or ghee, and that's very healthy. Let's take 1/4 cup of batter. Let's slosh it in. Tilt the pan so it's all nicely spread with batter, like like so. Let's cook our pancake here on our beautiful non-stick pan for about 2 or 3 minutes, or until it starts to curl up around the edges. And if you like, because it doesn't stick so much, you can have a peek underneath with your spatula and have a look at the bottom. If it's browning a little bit, that's great, you can turn it over. If you want to be real extravagant, you can flip it up. I'm not going to do it for you today because I'll probably drop it, but you can turn it over at your leisure, however you wish. Okay, let's turn it over now, shall we? Oh, this is looking interesting. There we are. Very nice indeed. Almost like a crepe. And dosa pancakes are very versatile. You can serve them with chutneys, different types of even vegetable fillings if you like. You can do all sorts of things with them. You can serve them plain, or you can roll them up and have them for breakfast the next day. They're great. Well, our first dosa pancake here is ready for a close inspection. We'll turn it over. Oh yes, it's beautiful on the other side. Okay, let's have a close look at this, shall we? Out she comes. Woo! Look at that dosa pancake. In all my humility, that's one of the nicest ones I've ever made. Let's go and make some more now, shall we? Don't mind me, I'm just going to cook another 24 dosa pancakes. In with a batter, turn it all around. Now for a quiet afternoon making dosas, or evening, or whatever. And there we go, the last of the stack. Well, that was a very interesting, warm afternoon of making dosa pancakes. I cooked them all myself, the whole stack, all 24, at least 24. Look, empty bowl, honest Indian, honest South Indian. Well, that just about wraps it up for this show. And, well, all I can say is I hope that you've enjoyed preparing these dishes as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. Happy and healthy eating.